Yeah, they are. There's no better way to start a show than that, friends. Hello, everybody. Happy Saturday morning from Awesemo.com. This is College Football DFS Live Before Lock. I am Ben Rassa, joined as I always am with our good friend of all on the Twitter sphere, Matt Gajeski. Best slate of the year so far, Matt. I don't think there's any argument there. How excited are you to dive into these 12 games?
Really excited, man. We have a lot of super competitive games. I'm, of course, excited for Notre Dame, but not only that, Alabama, and then really across the board, just good games at every single time slot.
It's really just a full day. I can't wait to get it started. I got to wash the bad taste out of my mouth from yesterday. It did not go my way. Maryland was dismantled. I have to take the L there. The Iowa Hawkeyes once again has destroyed me, but you know what? You're going to get that back and more today. But before we dive in, Prize Picks sticking with us, sponsoring the show today. Daily prop-based contests over there. If you haven't gotten started, they're offering a fantastic deposit bonus. And all you're doing, you're going to pick 2, 3, 4, or 5 players available, and you're going to go over or under the projections. So it's just like prop betting. You have opportunities there, and it's not just for college football. NBA is starting up soon. Certainly NFL. Baseball's in full swing. Playoffs about to begin. You can take advantage of so many mixed sports opportunities, a ton of value. Go to the App Store or Google Play. Make your first deposit using the promo code Awesemo. You're going to get an instant deposit match of up to $100. There are so many props on the board today. Matt, last week we talked about a couple, and one that I really liked last week was Grayson Mccall under passing yards. I'm going to do the same thing today. I think the Coastal Carolina quarterback doesn't have to throw a ton. They're 34-point favorites. I'm going under 258.5 passing yards for your boy.
I always like those bets. And I think the first 2 times I tried to do this with Coastal, it didn't work against like the Citadel. And I can't recall their week 1 opponent. But again, McCall has to do it through efficiency. It's not going to be through volume. So when they're in somewhat competitive games, even though they're still immense favorites, that's an approach I really like to take.
One other I'm going to give you, and then feel free, and we're certainly going to be talking about them throughout the show. Zach Evans for TCU has really dominated the touches lately in that backfield. I know it's a tough matchup with Texas. I think he's going to find his way into the end zone today. It's 0.5 rushing TDs is the line. I think he goes over that. I do think he scores on the ground.
I like that too. I think a lot of these runners are a little bit underpriced today. Evans being one of them. Even though they're slight underdogs, it's close enough where he should be worked in. And we've seen them ride him even in negative game scripts. So I wouldn't be too worried about that. I like Chez Mellusi as well for Wisconsin. And again, this is already up about 10 yards from where it opened. With Chez, he's still at 87.5. It's a bad game environment, but he's receiving the Jonathan Taylor treatment. This guy is receiving most of the backfield touches. Even in a slow game, Chez is still going to get there based on just raw volume. So I like the over on 87.5.
It's an interesting game, and it is one of the 12 that we're going to be talking about. Them and Michigan, no doubt about it. Super chat from David Johnson. Love to hear that. Best month ever playing daily fantasy. Well, that's no better endorsement than that. We've had some big winners. You can always go to awesemo.com/join, sign up a package for you. We obviously recommend that. All Matt stuff for college football behind the paywall. Projections. We are going to be offering, get it out now. I was going to save it, Matt, but you did so much work. You did projections for all the slates today, did you not?
Yeah, it's been a time issue for me early in the year, but the model's running pretty smooth now that we have some input, so I can get hopefully projections out for every single slate moving forward. So those should already be up. It includes the night slate, the late night slate. Everything should be available, and we're making them free, right? That's what you're referencing?
Yeah, we are. So if you're playing the night slate, you can hop on in, check those out for free. Just get a taste of what you can get each and every week. But let's dive in here. We've got 12 games. We're going to start with one of the big ones, even though the spread wouldn't indicate that. We've got Arkansas. They head to Athens to take on Georgia. The spread has been dropping. It's under 17 now. Georgia's a 16.5-point favorite. Over-under is just 48.5. Before we dive into Arkansas, I do want to ask you, Georgia's one of the teams that has just been ravaged by injuries. Are they getting healthier, or are they losing more guys, and kind of where do they stand heading into this game?
So JT Daniels is still banged up. He's supposedly a game time decision today. Their coach was actually on College Game Day already today. And if you caught that, he said it basically comes down to how JT Daniels feels. He is a difference maker for this team. I think he tries to get this game today just because they're playing Arkansas. It's going to be probably their toughest game of the year now that we've seen Clemson not live up to expectations. Daniels is basically a pocket passer, but him going out there is going to be huge for them. In the receivers, they've gotten a lot healthier. Dominic Blaylock is already warming up today, which is positive. He had like a little bit of a setback from his ACL tear. He pulled his hamstring. So it's nice to see him out there. They're also getting back their athletic 5-star tight end, Darnell Washington. So that gives them a lot of versatility with their playmakers. They can now use Brock Bowers and Darnell Washington, which is fantastic for this team. Brock Bowers, one of the most athletic tight ends in the country. He was clocked at like 22 miles an hour on one of his long catches. This dude can be used in and out like a receiver. And now they have Darnell Washington back. Gives him a ton of versatility. If I'm betting the game, I would actually take Georgia.
Now that it's cross 17, so would I. I have not bet it. We talked about that on Betting You every Wednesday, exclusive podcast content. You get that anywhere you have podcasts. And we were saying that it was upwards of 19.5, and the spread has continued to drop. For Arkansas, they've been incredibly impressive. They have beat everybody. They haven't really played a true road game. A lot of games in Fayetteville. They played in Jerry World. What do you think KJ Jefferson can do against this type of attack? And then are there guys on this Arkansas team that you want to target today?
KJ Jefferson, he hasn't been the best quarterback overall. He's mobile, which does do a lot for him. And I think that's going to make a difference here against Georgia. But at the same time, I think Georgia's defense being so strong might expose some deficiencies with the offensive line. They rank 95th. And again, Jefferson's mobility will buy him time, but that's going to be a huge issue against the Bulldogs here. And then he's only completing about 59.5% of his passes as it is. Now they're just going up against probably the best defense in the country. Treylon Burks is still a value at his price. He just got priced way down because of the matchup. He's going to see immense target volume this year and in this matchup. I think you could play him in GPPs, but overall, I'm probably trying to avoid most of this game because the total is so low.
And I assume you feel the same way about Traylon Smith in the backfield?
Yes, I do.
So on the other side, you mentioned Georgia already a little bit. What do you do with their backfield? We basically every time they're on a slate, we say it's one of the nastiest timeshares around. In a game like this that could be a little more competitive than certainly Vanderbilt when they were up 40 points instantly. Do you think one of these guys garners enough carries to be interesting, or is it just a pass?
It's a pass for me. It's not a situation I would like to target just because of how they use all these backs. Like they're going to use all four of them. And then from there, the receivers with these guys getting healthier, sure, that's a good thing, but we just have no idea who's going to be playing what role in the offense. I think Darnell Washington comes back, probably takes some receivers off the field, but you don't want to play him. He's maybe a little bit limited in his first game back. It's Brock Bowers or pass, and he's priced up. So it's just a pass for me.
Yeah, it's not the best game to target. We've got 12 of them. I don't think it's the best game to bet either. It would be Georgia or pass at this point. I don't think Arkansas has seen anything like this. Say what you want about Texas. This defense is absolutely fantastic. So whole different ball game today on the road to 48.5 point total. Many more games to get to. Tennessee and Mizzou, 65.5 point total. Now we're talking Tennessee's a 2.5 point road dog. Two teams that, at times have been and at times have looked okay. But I do think there could be some points here. Talk about Tennessee. They've obviously changed coaches. They should be more explosive offensively. Do you think that will show today?
Yeah, Missouri hasn't been great on defense overall. They're allowing over 200 rushing yards, actually 250 to opposing FBS opponents. Saw Pat Garwo go insane last week against them. But both these teams are pass heavy. Both of them are up tempo. Hendon Hooker is expected to be back, so that's going to drop the Tennessee pass rate a little bit. It should be slightly below average, but they're still playing with Heupel's patented up tempo pace. You're going to get a lot of volume from the Tennessee guys. Missouri's passing the ball over 60% of the time right now. So there's a ton of volume going there as well. This is low-key one of the contrarian game stacks I like, just expecting a ton of ownership going to Ole Miss, Bama. I like playing Hooker quite a bit because of his mobility. Again, banged up, but he's supposedly close to full health. You can play either of the backs. Jabari Smalls is a particularly good value on DraftKings. He's in a 50-50 timeshare with Tyen Evans, and Tyen Evans has a slightly better receiving role here. But both of these guys had 11 carries in their last game. Jabari Smalls in the previous game they both played, which was week 1, he outcarried Evans 20-16. So love him at 4.4K. I think he's in play for cash if you just need a salary saver, which you probably do for the Ole Miss and Alabama game. At receiver, Velus Jones is not a full-time player, and a lot of people probably will go to him just seeing the target numbers, the receiving yards, but he's running fewer routes, playing less snaps than Javonte Payton, Cedric Tillman, and Jalen Hyatt, who are the mainstays in the offense. You can stack Hendon Hooker pretty cheaply in this environment because you have two receivers that are full-time players below 4K in Hyatt and Cedric Tillman.
Would you potentially look to Hooker and Evans together?
I think you can do that because the team total is decent and their prices are not very expensive. I would rather do it with small, so you save even more salary, but I think it's okay with Evans.
Interesting. On the other side, talk about this Missouri offense you mentioned. They've really been passing the ball, but you also have Tyler Beatty, who's a true alpha in the backfield. Where's the priority there? Or any of these guys, cash viable? How do you break down this Missouri team that should put up a lot of points today?
Beatty's cash viable for sure. I think he's one of the preferred plays in cash. He has a massive workload on the ground. He's averaging 23 opportunities. For opportunities, I'm referencing targets plus carries. So Beatty's actually the second most targeted player on the team. He's tied for the second most receiving yards. Outside of Kiki Chisholm, they just rotate receivers on and off the field. Toski Dove, Chance Looper, Barrett Bannister, Dominic Lovett. You can't play any of those guys. They're all about 50% of the routes. It's Kiki Chisholm, Tyler Beatty, or bust, which makes Connor Bazelak really hard to stack. Even though he's been super efficient throwing the ball a lot, if you're stacking him, you're either throwing a Hail Mary on one of those dart throw receivers, or you're just playing Kiki Chisholm or Beatty.
Yeah, the thing about Missouri's offense, unfortunately, they don't have a dual threat quarterback, so I don't mind the stack with that. But Beatty's the guy. I think if you have the money, you're going to target. This was a late add to my card. I bet Missouri this morning. I got it at 2.5. I think they will do enough. They need to be better, particularly stopping the run. I think they'll be a little better, and I do think they're going to end up outscoring Tennessee today. I like this game. I think a lot of points are going to be put up.
Yeah, for that reason, I think it's a great tournament play for GPPs today.
Next game, another tough one. We've got Texas going to TCU. TCU lost last week at home, which is a little disappointing. Another healthy total, though, 65.5. Let's start with the Longhorns. It's been a rocky year, but they're starting to right the ship. Maybe they are peaking at the right time as they've got Oklahoma on deck as well. Casey Thompson, Bijan Robinson, big-time names. What do we prioritize, and how effective do you think they'll be today?
I think you want to get to Bijan Robinson if you can. He's been seeding more work out of the backfield than I think you would like, and he's more expensive than Beatty. Just for reference, he's averaging 19.5 opportunities. He's getting there mostly with efficiency. But just Beatty's role in the pass game, I would rather play him at a cheaper price and save that little bit of salary. But Bijan should be your preferred play here. Outside of him in the pass game, Casey Thompson had a phenomenal week 4. And I think you can still look to him in tournaments. TCU plays fairly fast. They're actually down a little bit in plays per game this year, and they're going to be around league average in pass rate. That sets up for a pretty good game environment here. And the total reflects that 65.5 in some spots. I think you can target either side of this, the pass game or the run game. If you're stacking Thompson, Jordan Whittington is the best play. He's actually cheaper than Xavier Worthy, which is a little bit surprising to me. Whittington is used more underneath, but he has more targets on the year, and he's playing out of the slot, so a little more consistent role. Joshua Moore's your punt play. He allegedly has been banged up, which is why his role has been reduced this year. I have questions about his health. He's only averaging 3 targets per game, and he still only has 63 yards on the year. So it's kind of stacked with Whittington or bust for me.
Yeah, Worthy in the last game. I mean, they hung 70 on Texas Tech. Worthy exploded, but in a game like that, I don't.
Yeah. And he only had 6 targets.
Yeah, he literally scored on 50% of his targets. That's what we call the Cooper Cup at this point, or the Jamar Chase, when you're just automatically in the end zone at all times. Probably unsustainable. On the other side, TCU, I don't think it was an awful loss to SMU, but at the same time, you got to hold serve at home. They've got Dugan. They've got Zach Evans. Where do you look to them? How effective do you think they'll be against Texas's defense, and kind of where are your priorities here?
I think they'll be fairly effective. The issue for DFS is Dugan's really hard to stack. They rotate receivers outside of Quentin Johnston. Earlier in the year, like Tay Barber and JD Spielman were afterthoughts, but they've slowly worked their way back into the offense for about 50% of the routes. That's coming at the expense of Blair Conrad, Darius Davis, Trevian Williams. So basically everyone out of Quentin Johnston is really tough to target here. And from there, they prefer to be run heavy if they're playing with a lead. Again, they're projected to trail here. So how does that factor in? The player I think you look to most if you're running back stacks from the Texas side is Zach Evans. And he's expensive, but he has completely taken over the backfield. Kendry Miller, just an afterthought at this point. Zach Evans has been incredibly efficient too, somewhat active in the pass game. Again, he's only just seeing this role. It's changed. And it was fortunate that we saw him get 3 targets in the last game. So I think he can be active enough in the pass game if TCU has to play from behind.
Yeah, he turned that into three catches for 70 and a touchdown. So This guy can obviously do it. He's dominating touches. You already mentioned that. It's a competitive spread, no doubt about it. I already mentioned I like his Prize Picks prop. I think he does find the end zone today. So you think stacking Texas, maybe running it back with Evans, is certainly a viable structure?
Yeah, or just running like skinny stacks because both quarterbacks are a little bit harder to stack. I think you could do like Evans and Jordan Whittington, or like Bijan and Quentin Johnston, even though that's probably not where I'd want to go, Johnson being expensive. But I don't even hate playing Bijan and Evans together. That's going to be a little bit weird. This game is a little harder to approach given the total. So I think it's going to be a little bit more contrarian outside of Bijan Robinson and expect him to be very owned.
So last question, just to kind of put it in context. And I know we haven't talked about all the running backs just yet, but someone like Zach Evans, you've got him 7,400 on DraftKings, 9,800 on FanDuel. Where does he stack up against Beatty and some of these other top end guys? Is he a luxury? Is he a priority? How do you break that down?
Beatty's the number one priority for me. He has a better workload than Bijan, and he's a more active pass catcher in what I would say is an equal matchup. Neither of the opponents can stop the run. So Beatty and Bijan, both fine. Beatty hasn't really seeded any work. Bijan has a little bit. From there, if you're moving down, I think Zach Evans has a very similar projection to like a Letty Brown. And you can get Letty Brown for 500 cheaper. I think those two are splitting hairs. They would be numbers 3 and 4 in just pure running back ranking. So Evans very high in the list. He's just kind of in a weird price tier, a little bit cheaper than Beatty, Bijan, a little bit more expensive than Letty Brown.
All right, here we go. Michigan going to your former stomping grounds in Camp Randall to take on Wisconsin. 43.5 point total. Just shows where these offenses are at. 2 years in a row, I, like an idiot, have backed Michigan in this exact spot, and they have been dismantled by Wisconsin. Hasn't even been close. Maybe today will be different. I haven't bet it yet, but I actually might. Michigan has been running the ball down everybody's throat. Wisconsin does not allow anybody to run. They're giving 1 yard a carry right now. That's pretty good. So the obvious question, can Corum and Haskins, who are primarily going to take this team where they need to go, can they run the ball against that front?
This, I think, is the best rushing attack Wisconsin will have faced this year. Notre Dame replaced all their starting offensive linemen. Penn State is still a work in progress. And both of those teams got there through the air. Notre Dame with some help from Graham Mertz, of course. But you mentioned it. How does this Michigan rushing attack going into the teeth of the Wisconsin defense stack up? I honestly kind of think whoever scores first in this game wins. Neither team is built to play from behind. As far as the DFS plays for Michigan, with Cade McNamara, he's still an unknown. So I guess you have that box checked. If he ends up being a really good quarterback, I would be surprised, but he hasn't shown it yet. So maybe you get some leverage there. But again, low volume passing attack. Unless they get down, I don't really see him changing and becoming a pass-heavy quarterback. That means you can't really stack him. They run a nasty rotation at receiver. Blake Corum and Hassan Haskins have gotten there through efficiency against weak opponents. They're still splitting the work 50-50, which is slightly moved towards Corum, but that's reflected in price. And Corum's more expensive than a lot of backs I would prefer, like Letty Brown, Zach Evans, some others. Michigan's a pass for me.
Yeah, they really are. On the other side, you mentioned Malusi earlier in the show on Prize Picks. It's a volume type play. Is in a 12-game slate, do you need to go there, or does the volume keep him afloat? And is there anything else from this Badger team that you think is worth talking about?
I think it makes him a solid GPP play. We know that volume is king. There's a little bit more to efficiency in college football, which I expect to be pretty low for Malusi here. But this is a guy that had 31 carries in week 1. He hasn't been ceding opportunity to other backs. Like Garendo is just coming in for a change of pace. Because of that, like he could fall in the end zone a couple times. He could backdoor his way into a 100-yard bonus, similar to like a Trayson Potts for Minnesota, just based on raw volume. For that reason, I think he's a good tournament play.
Any feel for the game itself?
I honestly considered betting Wisconsin on Monday when they were +1. The line moved too fast for me, and now I'm not going to bet it.
I really could use Harbaugh showing up for a change. I don't know if I'm going to bet it either. It's a tough game. I think there's certainly better options on the board. And listen, we have all the games listed there. 43.5 point total makes it very difficult to get to on a 12 game or so. I get that. Let's keep it moving. This is a good one. Louisville, 7-point dogs going into Wake, 63 point total. Both these teams have some things that certainly are attractive on the slate. And we'll start with Louisville. They've got a true dual threat, one of the more explosive quarterbacks in the country, Malik Cunningham. We've seen him double-digit rushing attempts in every single game. He is the catalyst. And outside of Ole Miss, they've looked very, very good. Got it done against Florida State last week, who still has 0 wins, but whatever. Where does he stack up? Is he a priority on this slate?
He is not a priority, just being a little bit more expensive than Corral. He's in a spot that's just hard to get to with that 80-point total game. But in GPPs, he has the upside mostly going to come from his legs. So you're hoping he rushes in a touchdown or 2 in that instance. He's also gotten a little bit easier to stack with Braden Smith going down with what looked like a severe knee injury. That's just going to narrow targets to Marshawn Ford, Jordan Watkins, and Justin Marshall. He's extremely cheap at 3,400. He ran a route on 92% of dropbacks, saw six targets in that game. Wake Forest is 7-point favorite, so Cunningham should be throwing a little bit here. I like Justin Marshall quite a bit in like contrarian options, like pivots off the Ole Miss guys, pivots off the cheap Alabama guys. He's going to play more than all of those players. And while they obviously have upside playing in an 80-point total, Marshall, I think, has the most consistent role for really cheap punt plays. So I will be looking to him a decent amount in tournaments. This game also has a healthy total overall, so it's not like you're sacrificing a ton by getting to it.
No, both teams want to. I mean, both teams are almost pushing 80 plays per game. That's really, really high paced. And I think that could create a really good situation. Where does Jalen Mitchell fall, the running back? Is he cannibalized enough by Cunningham, or at 5,100, do you say, okay, he's viable as kind of a secondary running back option?
I think he's viable in tournaments, but he's on the weaker end here. He's priced right above Kyron, right above Smalls for Tennessee. I would rather play both of those guys. And like you said, even in the red zone, like Cunningham has such a large role there that while Mitchell handles most of the running back touches, Cunningham is still handling 37.4% of the overall carries. Just for reference, Mitchell's at 38.7. So it's just a 1% difference there. A lot more opportunity for other players in the slate.
On the other side, I think, and GQ just said this, I think Wake Forest as a team is very underrated. Maybe Virginia's no good, but that was a team they just dismantled last week. They look good. Hartman is solid. They've got guys on the outside, Beal Smith in the backfield. How do you expect them to attack this Louisville team? And do you think they have just the clear advantage offensively?
It's a very good Wake Forest team, definitely an underdog in the ACC. They are going to be sensitive to game script no matter what. If they're playing from ahead, they're going to ride these 3 backs. If they're playing from behind, they're going to increase their pass rate drastically, and they're going to throw to Roberson and Perry. I think that makes stacks of this game live. Hartman, he's not really mobile, but he's also not a zero in the run game, which is really important. So he doesn't like have to get the 300-yard bonus. It would be and I do think he's live for it. Again, he's averaging 240 passing yards on 28 attempts with Wake Forest just pounding the ball on the ground. So he's been very efficient. He has 2 alpha receivers in Roberson and Perry. Roberson's extremely cheap. Like Roberson's a guy that averaged 100 receiving yards per game last year. He's still their target leader. If you're running stacks of this game, I'm definitely comfortable with Hartman to Roberson, run it back with like a Justin Marshall, a Jordan Watkins, even a Cunningham naked is something I think you can do. The running backs, Beal Smith, Christian Turner, and Ellison, they split the work almost down the middle. Beal Smith has been the most efficient, but at 6K, he's just like an opportunity cost play. There's so many other better running backs that will receive more opportunity there. Justice Ellison's actually someone I think to look at, and so is Christian Turner. Christian Turner is extremely cheap on DraftKings at 3,400. He's seen 15 and 12 carries in back-to-back games. He's somebody you can look to as just a pure punt play at the running back position.
So the one question I have for you, Wake is 4-0. They haven't been tested at all. Every game has been 20-point plus victories. If they fall behind early, do you think that they cede some of this? Because right now they are running the ball a lot. Do you think that Hartman's volume could be increased and maybe the carries on the ground dissipate if Louisville strikes first?
For sure. Last year, their pass rate was 48.5%. The offense is identical to what it was last year, outside of Kenneth Walker being gone.
And Donovan Green, my man.
Yeah, but A.T. Perry's filled in nicely for him. Like their pass rate was 10% higher last year.
Yeah, and I think when they get in some really competitive games, we're going to see Hartman's volume really pump up. Right now, they just look fantastic, though. I think they win the game. Spread feels about right, but I'm going to back Wake in life. I think they're just a good, solid team this year.
I agree with you. I particularly like Roberson as a buy low. And I think there's maybe the case to be made that Louisville's the best team they've played this year.
Yeah, I think they maybe by default. Who else did they? Old Dominion? Yeah, no. They
played an easy slate of games.
Yeah, it's been bad. And Florida State, yikes. They better win today. I'll tell you what, if Florida State doesn't win today, they might only have one win all year, and it'll be against my boys. UMass is on that schedule. Nobody cares about that. Let's keep it going. I don't know why this game is on the slate. They went to the Pac-12, USC, 8.5-point favorites, taking on a Colorado team that I just can't figure out. 51-point total. Oh boy, what is the status? I'll just open it up with a very generic question here. Where is this USC team just in all facets? How do you break them down? It's been quite a year already for the Trojans.
Yeah, real life, they're a disaster. DFS, I think they're somewhat interesting. They've had a lot of trouble with efficiency, particularly in the red zone. And I think this falls on Graham Harrell. Unfortunately, Clay Helton was the scapegoat. I think he would have been fired either way, but Graham Harrell certainly deserves some blame too. And I think he should be gone. But Jackson Dart being hurt, it at least gives us Keaton Slovis as a GPP option. His leash is going to be much longer with Jackson Dart hurt. They throw the ball incessantly. They run a ton of plays per game. Colorado will try to slow them down, but I think they can get there just through raw efficiency. Drake London has like perhaps the best role in college football. Again, the efficiency hasn't been there, but this dude's just averaging immense target volume. Taj Washington and Gary Bryan are also full-time players in the offense if you're just looking for cheap stacks. But if you're running stacks for this game, it's probably just like one receiver, maybe two, nothing coming back on the Colorado side. And that's the issue with the game overall. I don't think Colorado keeps it competitive.
If they don't keep it competitive, does former Texas great Keontae Ingram get involved? Like, what do they do in the backfield?
He's a pretty good GPP option, I think. Way more involved than Vave Malapai in the last game, which I think is deserved. He's been extremely inefficient throughout his career. Keontae Ingram, 14 carries to Malapai's 4. Again, he's just a opportunity cost play. Like Letty Brown's 200 more. I'm in cash and low risk contests. I'm always going to play Brown, but for the sake of GPPs, Ingram shouldn't be owned.
I think he is kind of an interesting pivot. You mentioned they're north of a touchdown favorite in a game that Colorado, I don't want to play this game because, you know, it doesn't work like this, but Colorado got rolled by Minnesota, dismantled, and then Minnesota lost to Bowling Green. So I don't know exactly what's going on with this team. Talk to me about them, because when the season started, I thought that Brendan Lewis could really be a guy that, you know, would be a true dual threat. We'd see some really impressive performances. He's just been downright awful. He's got one touchdown pass in 4 games, and they are not scoring whatsoever. Do you see anything changing here for this Colorado offense?
No, I don't. He's averaging 78 passing yards. He's just awful. He might get benched soon. Just don't play him.
Anything in the backfield? It looks like there's a timeshare going on with Broussard and Fontenot. Anything to decipher there? Or again, is it just a team in disarray?
A complete team in disarray. Fontenot actually outcarried Broussard in the last game. Broussard's a smaller back. He's been more efficient overall, but it's been very close. Again, they're not scoring. Game script's not going to favor them. It's just tough to get to any Colorado player. And then their receivers, nobody has more than 45 receiving yards on the year. Nobody has more than 11 targets. Just ignore Colorado.
So they get I can't even say the Bowling Green stamp of irrelevance now that they won a game. Maybe I'll go with the Florida State stamp of approval. Anyway, yeah, I'm with you. Not a great total, not a great team. I don't see anything happening there, even in tournaments. All right. The game that you want to talk about, are you wearing, what do you got going on? Notre Dame shirt? No? Keeping it casual?
Oh, you guys want to see my shirt?
Yeah, what do you got? Oh, the Owls. Okay. Where'd you get that?
One of my buddies had a brother that went there.
I respect that. I don't think Rice is on the slate, but if they were,
before the end of the year, man, I hope we get a Rice slate.
Nothing better than a Rice slate. All right, we got Cincy. We've got the Fighting Irish trying to remain unbeaten here. This is going to be what I think will be their toughest test. Cincinnati's a 2-point favorite in South Bend, which it is very difficult to win in there. Talk to me about Cincinnati. We know that Ritter has experience. He knows what he's doing, but at the same time, Notre Dame's defensive coordinator is very familiar with him. Can they design something to limit the plays? And how do you think Cincinnati attacks him?
I think Cincinnati is going to try to attack with like a multifaceted rushing attack using Ritter, using Jerome Ford. Both have been fantastic. And that's the strength of this team, is their run game. I do have concerns with their offensive line. They're replacing 3 starters, and they haven't played anybody good this year. I know they did play Indiana, but that win continues to look worse and worse the more we see of Indiana. Notre Dame has a good front on defense. They can rush the passer with an offensive line that currently ranks 105th in the country. What does Cincinnati look like when they have to play from behind? Now, I'm not saying they will. There's a chance they get up immediately in this game and exploit the edges they hold themselves. But overall, this defensive line, offensive line mismatch in favor of Notre Dame, I think could be something that works in favor of the Irish. We just haven't seen Desmond Ridder play from behind. Again, he's mobile, so he can mitigate some of these pressure concerns. But we're talking about Alec Pierce, Michael Young. These receivers are fairly unproven overall. So I'm not betting the game. I do see paths to both sides. If you're stacking Ridder, and again, he has multiple ways to get there with his legs through the air, and his receivers are super cheap. Like Alec Pierce, Michael Young, super easy stacks. The game is really low in the total, so I'm probably not going to play a lot of that. I do have some Ridder stacks, but very few. That's where I would be looking.
When you look at Jerome Ford in the backfield, you've got guys we've already talked about, Ingram and Evans and Beatty to a lesser extent. Is he behind all of them, or do you see him possibly being the focal point and being an effective play here?
Yeah, so when I ran projections, Ford has very similar opportunity to those players. Just the total is so low in this game. Like he's well below Beatty, well below some of these plays. In GPPs, you can get to him because the opportunity is there, but he's just naturally not going to project as well with like a huge gap in points.
On the other side, Notre Dame, we both thought that they'd probably take a step back this year, and I don't even think that that's untrue, even though they're unbeaten. They've been very close in all these games. They do have some things working in their favor. And you mentioned this on our Wednesday podcast, Betting You. Michael Mayer is a matchup nightmare. Cincinnati has legit corners, but I don't know if they can handle someone with the size of this guy. He's a target monster. He's just a monster altogether. Where does he go in? 5,500 on DraftKings, 6,800 on FanDuel, and then talk about the rest of this Irish attack.
This is a fascinating game for it. Probably not the most exciting, but if you just like the ins and outs of football, we just explained some leverage points for Notre Dame on defense. They have some on offense too. Cincinnati will have advantages in their pass rush. Notre Dame's offensive line is suspect. Myjai Sanders is a phenomenal pass rusher. They have two amazing corners in Bryant and Gardner. Unfortunately for Cincinnati, and we'll see if like Notre Dame's offensive line can hold up enough to even exploit this matchup. The two primary pass catchers that Notre Dame's going to use are avoiding those corners. Michael Mayer is going to run a lot out of the tight end side. He's going to run a lot out of the slot. He's going to be going up against DBs that are nickel corner safeties and linebackers. He's a mismatch for all of those players. And then you look to their second receiver, they'll utilize a lot. Kyron Williams, he's going to exploit a lot of these matchups as well. A lot of the receivers for Notre Dame are not as involved as some other teams, which I think somewhat exploits the weaknesses of Cincinnati's defense and avoids the strengths.
It's going to be a fascinating game. With Clemson going down, if Cincinnati rolls them, I think this is going to be the potentially best shot for, a non-big time conference team to get in the playoff discussion. But again, that's a lot of ifs. We're going to find out how good Cincy really is. I know you're not going to make a prediction on the game. I lean Cincinnati, but it is a very, very tough game. No doubt about it.
I would lean Notre Dame taking the points, just level of competition as well. Cincinnati has not played a team like Notre Dame, and people will reference Georgia. Georgia had half their team opt out of that bowl game. I'm not putting a lot of stock in that.
No, but they're better than Toledo, who should have beat you guys at home already. But we're going to find out.
They're better than Florida State. You say what you want about Toledo. We almost lost to Florida State.
That is disturbing. But on the other side, the old Murray State Racers were tied with Cincinnati at halftime, and then all hell broke loose. But yeah, it should be a good game. I don't think it's the best DFS game. All in all, 50-point total.
One last thing, Kyron projects really well, even in a bad matchup, and that is because he's so active in the pass game. Kyron Williams is a very, very good receiver, and he does avoid a lot of those matchups. So even with a low total overall, Kyron still is a pretty good projection, and he's super cheap.
Cash viable?
I think he's in play. I don't have him in my current cash lineup, but and that's mainly just a price thing. Like he's kind of in a weird price tier, but I think he is viable.
There you go. You can look to him on Prize Picks as well. He's been very impressive, no doubt about it. It's a good test today. All right. This is the game that almost got Matt suspended on Twitter, and the game that we all want to get to. We've got Bama. We've got Ole Miss. 14.5-point spread. Total is almost 80, 79.5. Let's start with Ole Miss. Let's start with the news of the day. Mingo broke a foot. No chance he is straight out. What does that do to this Ole Miss passing attack and this team in general?
I don't think anyone really knows what it's going to do. A couple things we know for sure. Drummond is going to continue to play his consistent role in the pass game. Braylon Sanders is there as well. The question is who fills in for Mingo. And I think there's a couple things they could do. A lot of people are just assuming that Jaden Jackson comes in and takes the spot of Mingo. And Jaden Jackson's listed as his direct backup on the depth chart. But as we know, teams don't necessarily follow the depth chart. Sometimes they will move players around a little bit in order to get their best personnel on the field. We actually saw this back when DK Metcalf got hurt for Ole Miss. They took AJ Brown out of the slot and moved him out wide. My fear is that they take Drummond out of the slot and move him out wide. And remember, last year, he was exclusively a boundary receiver when they had Elijah Moore. That may take him just out of that role and then put Jahcour Pearson in the backup slot, who's actually played more than Jaden Jackson this year. And there's also a chance that they just split. So maybe you see Jahcour Pearson in some formations out of the slot with Drummond out wide. Maybe you see Drummond in the slot, Jaden Jackson out wide. And then John Rice Plumlee's still there too. He's been playing a gadget role. So it's a really tough situation to decipher. I think most people are going to go to Jaden Jackson as the pure listed backup. In tournaments, for that reason, I like taking stabs on Rice Plumlee, Jahcour Pearson. I still think Jaden Jackson's a fine GPP target. But overall, the best price-adjusted play by far is Sanders.
When you look at Corral, again, he's an expensive quarterback, as he should be. He's been unbelievable. We're going to see today, if you play him, how many guys are you looking to pair up with him? Is it a full-on onslaught of the game? Like, talk to me about the lineup construction if you do click in Corral.
I think you want to stack him with 1 to 2 players. It's hard to stack a lot of expensive players with him. And luckily, some of these guys are really cheap, like Pearson, Jackson, Rice Plumlee are all at the min or just 100 above the min in the case of Rice Plumlee. Sanders is 4.8 on DraftKings. He's really cheap as well. He's easy to double stack. On the other side, they're not as easy to stack, and the run backs are going to be expensive for the most part. So overall, I think you got to be careful with the spot, pick and choose who you want to go with.
What do you expect out of this backfield for Ole Miss, even if they fall behind? Is someone like Ely in play? A lot of points are expected. Can he coexist, or is he game script dependent?
I mean, he's viable in GPPs. This Ole Miss team had 2 100-yard rushers against Bama last year, 2 of them. This Ole Miss team will use 3 backs, which hurts the production for them even more, but they're viable in GPPs.
And it looks like, just jumping back real quick, I don't think we need to rehash it. It looks like JT Daniels will not be playing for Georgia. They'll be fine.
I don't think that really does anything.
Neither do I. I just more on the betting side of things. I'm not betting Georgia now. Yeah, definitely going to pass.
Stetson's bad.
There you go. Petrus bad. Guy's going to win the Heisman. I'm going to be
all right.
Living under
quick on the
bridge.
Petrus thing. Petrus did not even play that good of a game. The interceptions from Tagovailoa just put him immediately in scoring positions. And then rushing touchdowns from Petrus. Are you kidding me?
Bad things happened last night. Very, very bad. But
I mean, if you played Petrus, congratulations. That was a really
that's just ridiculous. I'm more Maryland.
He was unowned. Maryland is the better team than Iowa. I will die on that hill.
Let's go. This is what I'm talking about. You say these crazy things so I don't have to. We're going to find out one day that I was fraudulent. That day is not going to be today. So let's just keep it moving here. We've mentioned Ole Miss. Obviously, they've got a juggernaut on the other side. Bryce Young has been fantastic. He's got everything that you could want. So where do you go? Again, this game is ridiculous. How do you decipher how much is too much and who you want to prioritize in a game with an 80-point total?
I definitely think in cash, you want to play a lot of players from this game. Bryce Young's been fantastic, especially as a passer. He was recruited as a dual threat and he hasn't really run yet this year. It's still in his repertoire, so I think he can. He's mainly using it to mitigate pressure, which I think is going to be an issue for Alabama all year long. But he's been extremely good under pressure. There's basically no knocks against Bryce Young at this point. Pretty easy to stack, and there's players at all price points. Jamison Williams, a little bit more expensive than Mechie, which surprised me here. Right now, Mechie, he's going to be the best player to stack him with. And then from there, Alabama just rotates player personnel in and out of the lineup. So it's really hard to get this team. Slade Bolden, against Florida, he ran around on 68% of dropbacks. So if you think the game's competitive up-tempo, maybe you see more Slade Bolden. But again, they try to script games according to defensive weaknesses. So in the last game, Jaleel Billingsley popped up for 6 targets. He's going to be a really athletic tight end. Like they use Billingsley on kickoff returns sometimes, even though he's a big body, like slot receiver type tight end. he's really cheap and he's popping in a lot of projection models. So I expect a lot of people to play Billingsley as the cheap attachment to this offense. But even he's splitting time with Cameron Latou. JoJo Early mixes in for snaps. Outside of Mechie and Williams, it's a complete dart throw with Bama. And one of these guys probably has an amazing game, but your guess is as good as mine to who it's going to be. We've now seen Latou, Bolden, and Billingsley all have good games, and they've only played 4.
Last question I got 2 last questions on the game. One from the DFS side. Do you think it's viable / will you have any lineups that have Corral and Young together?
Yeah, in cash.
There you go. Do you expect Bama's defense, because they had literally no answers for Lane Kiffin and this offense? Do you think they will be better in this spot?
No, they had no answers for Florida, and neither of the quarterbacks can throw.
Did you?
They were playing a one-dimensional Florida team, and they almost lost.
So do you think Ole Miss, even with Mingo out, has a real chance here?
Yeah, last year. Well, I mean, last year's a different story. They obviously had Elijah Moore, and Mingo was just a part-time player. But Ja'Cour Pearson's a good transfer. He came in from Western Kentucky, correct me if I'm wrong, and they have a lot of high recruits. So I think it's going to be a step back for them. If you're betting something like the total, I would look under. But at the same time, I think they can move the ball.
Going to be a fascinating one. Cannot wait to see it. I don't even know what I want to happen. Honestly, I kind of hope Ole Miss hangs in there. All right, we've got 4 games left. We got a lot of people. It's a great college football Saturday, so I appreciate each and every one of you. If you can hit the like button, we would appreciate it immensely. And also, we had a couple questions about where can we find the betting takes. Certainly, we're providing them here, but Awesemo Odds YouTube channel is exclusive betting content, all betting content. You want to head over there as well and subscribe and catch us each and every week, dropping that for NFL, college football, and every other sport. We got 4 games left. This is one you got me on. I am on the Ducks with you today. Oregon, the spread has moved. You called it on Wednesday. They're now up to an 8, and I see 8.5 out there as well, point favorite against Stanford, 57.5 point total. Let's start with this Oregon rushing attack. It seems like a prime spot for them to just absolutely gash Stanford on the ground. UCLA did it last week. Verdell did it against Ohio State. Where does he fit into all these guys that we've talked about in the backfield?
Yeah, Oregon, they just have a lower total than a lot of backs on the slate. They run a somewhat of a timeshare. Travis Dye has taken a little bit of a step back. But for those reasons, Verdell doesn't project as well as like Beatty and Letty and some of the other elite backs. But he has the upside, and he's clearly already shown it against strong defenses this year. So one of the premier tournament plays.
Other than that, with this team, can you go to Anthony Brown? He's a dual threat, but he's a little expensive. Is he on the radar, or do you think you stick to the ground game?
I will not play Anthony Brown. He has no upside as a rusher or a passer. He has 1 300-yard passing game in a 5-year career.
Anything on the outside for the Ducks?
They rotate like 6 receivers.
Well, what are you going to do? Thibodeau is back. Should be interesting to see what he can do. What does that do to this Stanford team who, honestly, I don't know exactly what to make. When I think of Stanford, I still think of they run the ball exclusively. That's not really the case here. But does that mean that we can go to their passing attack?
Yeah, they're way different this year and last year for that matter. They've been over a 50% pass rate in back-to-back years now. They're way slower than last year. And I think that's just a lack of efficiency in a small sample size. They're running 15 fewer plays per game. Expect that to come back up. But the offensive line for Stanford is atrocious. And getting back Thibodeau for Oregon is going to be a huge mismatch for this team. I think if you're looking to the team overall, McKee's a GPP target that I probably don't want to get too much of. I don't have a lot of McKee today. And then looking at the receivers, they do receive volume. So that's something you can bank on, like Bryson Tremaine, Elijah Higgins, John Humphrey is really cheap. I still don't want to get a lot of them, just lack of efficiency, but I would say they are GPP plays.
I just want to rehash. I'm sorry to jump back 1 sec, but chat mentioned this, and it is worth asking you about. What do you make of Bama's backfield? Brian Robinson and those guys, do you think they could have a big role in that game?
Yeah, they're definitely good GPP targets. Sorry, we glossed over that a little bit. Robinson's back from injury. It's an 80-point total. They're going to use 3 guys at least, maybe 4 if Trey Sanders sees a bigger role. But if you hit the lotto on the touchdown scorer, it might take down a GPP.
You've bet Oregon. I know you like them. Anything else to say on this game?
Not really. It's pretty underwhelming. I did bet Oregon on the Ole Miss Bama game. I bought out of my Ole Miss position. I don't have a bet on that game anymore.
And then you got me to buy out of mine. So yeah, times are tough. I didn't want to mess around with that. There's a lot of bets on my card, and Oregon is one of them. All right, 3 games left. Let's go. Texas Tech, West Virginia, 7-point spread. Red Raiders are dogs, 55-point total. I mentioned this earlier in the show. Texas went biblical on them last week. I don't know if we're going to see that, but at the same time, clearly there's some issues still with this defense. Let's start with their offense, though. What can they do here? They're going into Morgantown. How effective do you think this Texas Tech offense will be?
They lost their quarterback, and he's just been a middling player this year. Colombi's been really bad throughout his career, and then he eclipsed 300 yards last week for the first time in his career in relief. So it shows you how bad Tyler Show has been. Colombi, I mean, he's operating an offense that's typically up-tempo, typically pass-heavy. So in GPPs, maybe you look to him, but he has a long history of being a bad player. He's pretty easy to stack. It's Eric Ezukanma is the alpha, and then Kalen Geiger second, and then everyone else is rotating. So those stacks are viable. I have a little bit of Texas Tech today, but ultimately not very much.
On the other side, one of our friends in the Petrus bucket, Jared Doege. Anything before we get to Letty Brown? Is there anything you want to talk about in the West Virginia passing attack?
They're pass heavy. They're a little more up tempo, and they've been down this year in plays per game. Typically, they're a little bit above league average. They just rotate so many players out there. It's probably Winston Wright or Bryce Ford Wheaton if you're trying to get to one. Sam James being a little expensive. I don't love that, but they don't have a ton of upside. The leader is averaging 55 receiving yards per game, so just not a ton of upside outside of a big outlier game here. Doege is almost impossible to play because of how many sacks he takes. There's calls for him to get benched too. His leash is definitely getting shorter. And then the back, you mentioned Letty Brown. He's the best play in the entire game. He's way too cheap for his role in the offense. He's averaging 19.8 opportunities per game, depressed by games against like Long Island. So this was well above 20 in competitive spots. Good pass catcher, doesn't see any work. In the 2 competitive games, there wasn't another running back that even touched the ball. Last week against Oklahoma and week 1 against Maryland, Letty was the only running back that saw a carry. And then we skipped over SaRodorick Thompson on the other side too. Taj Brooks is out of this game, and SaRodorick Thompson, this will be his 3rd game back from injury. In the 2nd game back, he immediately took over the backfield, 16 carries, out-carried Xavier White 16-8. I think he's a decent GPP target.
Yeah, you mentioned Letty Brown just should dominate touches here. On Prize Picks, his over-under for rushing yards is 96.5. Does that feel too low, too high, about right?
I think it's a little bit too low. It came up, I think, when you could have got him at like 89, that was where to take it.
What about Thompson on the other side, 65.5?
He's also up. He was in the 50s. I think that is something you could maybe exploit. Texas Tech has shown the willingness to run even when they're down in games. Like SaRodorick, 16 carries last week in a game that was out of hand. That's kind of ridiculous.
It is a little shady, but yeah, this is, again, tough game. Feels about right. I don't think you want to mess around with West Virginia. I think the Texas Tech side for me has a little more variance. I don't hate that. But at the same time, West Virginia, they're going to pound it with Letty Brown. You've already mentioned what a fantastic play he is. I don't think there's anything really more to say about that.
No, I think this game's pretty straightforward.
All right, 2 left. God, here we go. Oklahoma, 11.5-point favorite, going to Manhattan, 52.5-point total. You would think that they will be ready, considering this is the team that ended them in week 2 or 3 last year. Oklahoma has been horrendous. They have not covered at all, unless you went to the, I don't even know if you could get a line on Western Carolina, but they've done nothing against Nebraska. They almost lost to West Virginia. Now they hit the road. God, though, I like that spread. What is going on here? Rattler, talk about calls to be benched. He is in the doghouse already. He's sub 9K, though. Can you go to him as a contrarian option?
I think you can because he's shown upside in the past. I hate his price. Based on how he's played this year, he should be cheaper. You're basically, if you are playing, if you're playing him, you're just going off the fact that he's been an elite quarterback in the past. Overall, I'm probably not going to get to a lot of Rattler, really low total, slow-paced game. Kansas is just going to drain clock. Rattler's not a great mobile quarterback. He does have some mobility, but he's not elite. He's not like Malik Cunningham or anything like that. And he's extremely hard to stack because of Lincoln Riley's unwillingness to commit to his best players.
Marvin Mims, you say? 4.8K tag for him, and it's so sad because what do you even do with it at this point? Can you even go there?
Lincoln Riley should be crucified for his usage of Marvin Mims.
Times are tough. All right, let's get into this game though, because you've got Radler. We mentioned him. Kansas State only runs 55 plays a game, so they are going to slow it down as much as possible. Can we get to someone in the backfield? I know that's another pain point for you when you look at the transfer from Tennessee and Eric Gray versus Kennedy Brooks, who I am also in your camp that he should be dominating touches.
Yeah, the touches have actually swung in Gray's favor slightly. It's like a 60-40 timeshare. Brooks has been the more efficient rusher, so it's very frustrating to see this. Like, these guys are GPP targets because Kansas State is horrific. And if you saw Oklahoma hang like 40, 50 points on them, nobody would be surprised. It's just not reflected in the total right now. So you're just banking on efficiency that they haven't displayed. With that said, I think they're possible plays in tournaments.
On the other side of this game, can you get to anything on a team that wants to be slow, methodical, make it ugly? All their quarterbacks are seemingly injured. Who's even going to be under center for Kansas State? And what do you think of this offense?
Will Howard is supposed to be active. He's been really hurt this year, so I think they'll still split time. You can't play any of the pass catchers. None of them are averaging more than 42 yards per game, and the target leader has 17. With that said, Deuce Vaughn, he's their target leader, and almost all of the touches are going to him. You talk about their plays per game, it's at 55.7. Deuce Vaughn is averaging 22.8 opportunities. This dude is nearly handling a touch on half of their offensive plays.
So do you go to, like, again, I know this is the theme of the show, Deuce Vaughn or Beatty, Deuce Vaughn or Letty Brown? Like, how do you decipher where he fits in?
Yeah, just bad game environment overall. So Letty Brown and the better backs are going to get the edge as far as projection goes, but he's another player that you can use in tournaments because the volume's so good.
Certainly he's one of the true, like, dual threat running backs where he's going to get real targets if they have any hope. And I would say there'd be no hope, but Oklahoma defines the odds every year in a bad way. Kansas State, Deuce Vaughn is the only guy on that offense that can do much of anything. I still think, and I know I'm crazy, that Oklahoma is going to be all right. Just in general, I think they will survive these type of games, and then we'll see what happens next week in, what is it, Red River, whatever they call that game. I don't care. They play Texas. That's all you need to know. Anyway, we've got one last game here. We go to the Big Ten. We got Ohio State, another team that struggled early in the season, and they actually lost already. 15-point favorites going to Rutgers, 58-point total. All right. We know that Ohio State has a ridiculous receiving core. Stroud is a little banged up. He should be good to go. They held him out because they sacrificed Akron to the gods. Where is he at, and what do you do with these receivers?
I think he's a fine play. Pretty good in GPPs. Don't mind his price whatsoever. You're actually saving some money going down to him. You just hope Rutgers can keep this somewhat competitive. And I think, fortunately, Rutgers has been pretty up-tempo this year. They're running 76 plays per game. Part of that due to opponents, but they actually did hang in there against Michigan. So I think there's some optimism this game could be close. And right now the total, it's at 57.5. That's fine, but Ohio State just north of a 2-score favorite. So they do think Rutgers can play a little bit. I think that's good for Stroud, who's been extremely efficient through the air, partially just on the back of having Chris Olave and Garrett Wilson, which is fine. I think you can play him no problem in tournaments.
One of the good things, we've mentioned a lot of coaches that at times can be really frustrating. It is good to see at least Ryan Day realize that Trevian Henderson is absolutely unstoppable, and he has strongly emerged as the guy. Where do you put him today, and just in general, when you talk about this Ohio State running back committee?
Yeah, I think he has a kind of tenuous hold in the backfield. I'm not sure that they're done using Kyron Williams and Master Teague. You can't really take anything away from their last game where they split it evenly. I think you can take a little bit away from the prior game where Trevian Henderson had 22 carries and Master Teague had 15, but it still seems like a timeshare to some degree.
Anything else you want to talk about from Ohio State, or do you want to go to the other side?
Wilson's the better play between him and Olave, but that's just straight up based on like target volume and efficiency. He should be more expensive, but play them both if you're playing this stack. Play one or the other. Jackson Smith-Jigba is your consolation prize. Ruckert's a really cheap like touchdown dart throw. I think you can play any of those guys.
In terms of Ruckert, I want to ask you specifically, he's 3,300 on DraftKings. Would you rather go to him or Marshall?
Marshall.
Okay. Just want to make sure. Rutgers side, talk to me about the Fighting Greg Schianos. They're better this year. They were not they played pretty good in the Big House last week. Not a high octane team, but what do you expect them to try to do here?
I think they're going to try to run the best they can and then have to turn to the pass inevitably. Vidrell's a decent dual threat. They're just not on the level that Ohio State is. I think they'll struggle with some efficiency on the ground, but Pacheco's been the lead back. I would rather just get up 200 and play Kyron Williams or go down and play Jabari Smalls. I think there will be some decent target volume for Bo Melton and Aaron Cruikshank if you're looking for a run back, but I don't think that's necessary.
I assume you don't want Vidrell in lineups.
No, I don't. I axed him out of my player pool.
Okay. Blacklisted. Sorry, guy. All right. Well, you mentioned Bo Melton. We just had a question about Bo Melton. Do you think Mingo pushes Braylon Sanders ahead of Bo Melton?
Yes.
All right. We've got a couple minutes left. We'll do some rapid fire questions as we always do. Hit the like button. Mechie and Letty or Bijan Robinson and Meyer? I assume that's the Notre Dame tight end, I'm assuming.
Oh, Mayer. I would prefer the former, the first one.
Mechie and Letty?
Yeah.
Society is all on that. Okay. So you mentioned in cash at the beginning, you're going, obviously people ask this, and if you haven't watched the show, you're definitely going 2 QBs in all lineups. Let's get that out there right now. And you're looking to pay up at both QBs potentially for cash?
I'm playing on both sides. I'm playing, Corral and Bryce Young.
Favorite QB play for the slate? I know that's kind of a loaded question, but
Bryce Young.
This is my own question. We didn't even get this from chat. If Ole Miss wins today, do you think Corral is in the driver's seat right now to win the Heisman?
Yes.
Top flex player is difficult. You can answer that if you want. It's just very hard to know how much money and salary you have.
Beatty, all things considered.
All right, let's go Missouri. I bet them. Favorite bet today?
Western Michigan. Not on the slate, but Western Michigan over Buffalo.
And you got that at 6.5. It's up to 7. I still think it's good there. Billingsley or Braylon Sanders on FanDuel?
Sanders.
Ford or Deuce Vaughn?
Who's Ford?
I assume they mean the Cincy running back.
Okay. You use first names. Like I immediately went to Marshawn Ford. So use first names. I would prefer Deuce.
Yeah, I would too. His pass catching ability. And, I don't know exactly what we get from Cincinnati. All right. Last question. Friend of the show from Slim. Favorite cheap 3K wide receiver for cash?
Oh, that is a tough ask, my friend. Chalkboard Pearson.
Yeah, I don't know if that's the build that you would want potentially for cash, just in my opinion. But there's some guys down there. I don't think it's impossible. All right. We have done it. 12 games up, 12 games down. I want to repeat. Matt was good enough to do projections for the different slates today. So those are free in front of the paywall. Get inside, take a sneak peek of what we have here at Awesemo. Again, thanks to Prize Picks. Use that promo code Awesemo. Good luck today, my friends. Hope to see some green screens and some bet slips that are cashing. We're going to right the ship today. 12 games up, 12 games down. Good luck. Same time next week. We'll see you then.